lawsuits and uncertainty, which again is, in an already uncertain industry, it's just another complication that these companies really didn't need.
Wes, you're probably feeling lonely down there. So as I drive down the interstate and I see billboards for car dealers and retail stores, or I turn on the TV and see commercials for all kinds of goods and trinkets. If I am a marijuana retail store, a dispensary, what steps do I have to go through if I want to advertise my product and my services to this community?
So the number one thing is compliance and the regulations around advertising, the channels we're allowed to use, the messaging we're allowed to use. It gets granular all the way down to what fonts we're allowed to use. So the number one thing is to educate yourself on the really specific requirements of the state regulations. And then beyond that, once you have a good solid understanding of that, then you have to submit everything to the state. And that can take anywhere. I think the quickest turnaround I ever had was 8 days. And sometimes it takes 30 plus. So that can be really challenging, especially if you have strategic campaigns that are based on launching things at certain dates. Sometimes you're not really aware of how long it might take for something to get turned around by the state. And that's because they do have such a huge preponderance of things to review. It's very labor intensive for them to review every single billboard, every single print ad, every single digital ad, every single radio ad, every single television ad. It's really a very large burden of labor on the state to handle all these regulations. To the point that fairly recently a memo came out where they basically said, look, if you're submitting advertising that blatantly does not follow these regulations, we're going to charge you for our time to review things that are obviously not compliant. One thing that came up recently was, if you're aware, 420 is, kind of a cannabis holiday. And so a lot of, marketing strategies involve doing things around that. But however, the state has said, look, we don't want you using any kind of, pot slang. So you can't say pot, weed, doobie, 420. You can't talk about being high, So, and that even comes down to things like, if I want to say that we offer high quality cannabis, I can't say that, I have to say premium. Because the word high has these, this stigma around it. And so, it really does get quite granular, and you have to kind of always be thinking about all those things. But when we were doing marketing around 420, since the phrase 420, just 420, was a banned phrase, it's like, okay, so I guess we have to say 4.20 to make it about the date that the event is happening. And so, we had created creative and advertising that used 4.20, thinking, hey, we're in the clear. This is great. We go ahead and submit everything. We've got, a lot of promotion happening on social. We've got all these assets out there. And then literally on 4/19, a memo came out from the state letting people know, okay, we've gotten so many submissions in that have 420 on them that are obviously not acceptable. Here's the only acceptable ways that you can advertise 420. It has to be 4/20/18, or it has to be April 20th with a TH, 2018. And so then, then we're scrambling the day before to redo everything with not even 4.20.18. I have to use the slashes because they were very specific, and that's how granular it gets. And so, as a director of marketing, that kind of thing can be very challenging. It's something that is ever present on my mind. But at the same time, having all these extremely strict compliance issues and regulations, it helps us because it keeps the playing field level across all of organizations in the state. Because, when we're dealing with things like this cultural stigma, I understand the reason that we have, prohibitions on using certain slang terms or prohibitions on using wacky fonts, because one of the regulations is you have to use sans serif fonts. So even a serif font like Times New Roman we're not allowed to use. But the reason for this strict regulation is it's to set a very high standard for our state. to let people know on the national level that Nevada is extremely experienced at regulating kind of complicated industries like prostitution and like gaming and so forth. And so it's short of just letting them know, hey, we are the gold standard on setting a very high level of regulation. That's who we want to be. That's where we are. And that actually helps because, if you did have a lot of companies that were sort of always using slang and that kind of thing, it could reflect poorly on our industry. So I actually do appreciate that they do have such high standards because I think that, especially considering us and considering us in comparison to other states, we really look, we look fortunate, we look professional. We were able to deal with that stigma a little bit better.
Can you do TV advertising?
We can do TV advertisement, but if you may have noticed, you never see any consumption in these advertisements, and that's because we're not allowed to depict consumption. So I can't have a picture of someone smoking a vape pen. I can't have a picture of someone doing a dab in a dab rig or anything like that. We're not allowed to actually depict the consumption of the product. We can depict the product as long as the product's packaging is all compliant, which there's a whole bevy of interesting rules about how you're allowed to package products. We partner with an organization called Bloom Farms that's based in California, and because of the state regulations, they had to sort of retool a lot of their marketing for our market. Because even things as basic as their vape pens were called highlighters, and so the packaging had highlighter on it. The fact that it had the word high in it, that's not acceptable. So all the packaging that was already made got kind of grandfathered into that, so we're allowed to use the boxes that already exist, but once they're gone, we have to only use packaging that doesn't have the word high. So we can only use the word premium, stuff like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to print and other types, are you limited on where, how,
Yes.
things like that?
So the burden of proof is on us to demonstrate that where we're going to post this advertisement, be it a website or a magazine, the burden of proof is on us to demonstrate to the state that less than 30% of the audience is under 21. And that's across the board except for sporting events. It used to be the same for sporting events, but fairly recently a memo came out a couple of months ago that basically said you can't do any sponsorship of sporting events if even one attendee is under 21. So that basically writes out all sporting events. But so things like if we want to do a website takeover on rgj.com, or if we want to post an ad in Edible magazine or something like that, obviously the disclaimer has to be on literally everything that we do. But we also have to provide the graphs and the demographic proof that less than 30% of their audience is under 21. And that's also true with billboards. Billboards are not allowed to appear within 1,000 feet of any school, park, government building, or sporting event stadium. So, it's a fun puzzle to look at a map and figure out, okay, which billboards can we take a crack at? Okay, which ones are actually available? And kind of keep an eagle eye on, oh, I know there's this billboard over on Wells Avenue that's the only one on Wells Avenue that's not within 1,000 feet of a park or a government building. And I'm going to keep my eye on exactly when that one comes up, available again. It's a fun puzzle to solve.
We'll go up here and then at the bottom.
Hi, thank you for the mention on edible. I'm one of the owners of Edible Reno Taco.
Oh, fantastic.
And I've lost all you guys. Sarah Lomas hasn't been in a while. Mint had to pull their ads. Bloom had to pull their ads. And, I went and I tried to get a meeting with some people who maybe could help push the taxation department into changing their mind. I mean, it can be on billboards. Little kids are staring out the window all day. That doesn't make any sense to me. I know that the taxi cabs in Vegas just fought for being able to have the signs on. And meanwhile, even though my demographic is not 21 and younger, they say that they can't prove, that I cannot prove that more than 30% isn't looking at our magazine. And we have distribution at the airport, which they say I can't distribute at the airport. I'm actually talking with one of your competitors to do a postcard insert so that I can have 1,000 less made, so that I could distribute those to the airport. But this is stupid. This is like pulling teeth, and you've got people in the taxation department, because I've been there, where at the very last minute, you know, we're going to the printer in 3 hours, and all of a sudden, I'm getting a new ad because the taxation department decided an ad they approved. A week later, they decided that it wasn't approved anymore. And I'm really frustrated with that stuff because, I mean, it should be a trickle-down thing. We believe in the medical side of it, and we should be able to put that in our magazine. I have booze in there, I have gambling in there, and I should be able to have the marijuana in there. And how do I get past this stuff? Because it's a lot of money.
I truly believe that it's just kind of a waiting game, and that we should just continue to be as compliant as we absolutely can, and that this is a very new change in the industry, rec being legal since July. And I really do believe that they started off with this extremely strapped down, you know, highly regulated way of dealing with advertising, that over time, you know, as these concerns come up, that they will get a little bit easier on it over time.
Well, who do I hit for that kind of stuff? Do I call the taxation department and say, hey, you know, I mean.
That's an excellent question, and I'm actually not certain personally. And that's something I can look into and get back to you for sure.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to remind folks, we've got about 30 minutes of show left, so don't feel like you have to rush off if you have more questions. Mr. Belknap, I think you were next.
Well, I just, out of the point of curiosity, wanted to know how you got around broadcast, radio and television, since they're federally regulated.
That's an excellent question. So it's really about the comfort level of the individual channel or station. You know, certain ones have told us outright, flat out, we cannot do any kind of business with you. And then there are others that are far more comfortable with it. And what they're able to offer is they're able to offer specific day parts where they can prove that, you know, the listenership or the viewership is over 21, you know, more than 30% of them. So in other words, we can do ad buys that are after 10 p.m., you know, it's that kind of thing. So they've identified, they want to do business with us, and so they've done the legwork on identifying which day parts they're able to offer us that fall within state compliance, and so they feel comfortable advertising us because they are doing their due diligence to stay within the state compliance. So kind of the same way that these other folks are handling it. It's just, you know, cross all your T's, dot your I's, and yeah, it's the best you can hope for.
All right, next, right here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Manuel. I work for the University Language Bank, which provides interpretation and translation services. You mentioned the language in regards of English ads and everything like that, but how about if the ads, you know, this is a global economy now.
Yeah.
We're seeing a bunch of other people coming from all over the world in Reno and into that. But if these people, you want to put an ad out there, who, not beyond Spanish, obviously, biggest market here. If you want to advertise in Chinese as an example, how do you go about it, understanding the regulations with the fonts, and not only the fonts, but more the messaging?
So they have not given any kind of memorandum or any kind of advice on that. So we're not currently advertising in any languages besides English, although we do have plans to do so in the future. And my understanding of that is really we would have to bring that up at a meeting and see if we can get kind of a memo, like counsel on that. We also have lawyers that we run everything by all the time, and so we would probably reach out to our lawyers first to get advice on this issue, because it probably has already come up in Las Vegas. So we normally reach out to our lawyers for advice on these things first, but to be honest, you know, the state has not addressed it at all. So it's possible that we could kind of just operate in the gray area for the moment until there is specific language about what you're allowed to say in various languages, but at the moment there hasn't been any counsel given on that.
Okay, I think that's all.
Excellent question, though.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Cliff Mark. I'm an investment advisor. I'm going to make an assertion. I think that a year from now, all the things that you're concerned with will be moved. And the reason is, if you start going to visit candidates in Nevada. I don't care what their political stripe is, Democrat or otherwise, and ask them how they're going to fund the projects that they want to fund. The first answer now is always future revenues from the sale, taxation of the sale of marijuana. The politicians will come up with your solutions.
Yeah, that's why, you know, a lot of my answers, especially with the question over here, was I really do think it's just a matter of patience. This is a very nascent industry. And it's not just nascent nationally, it's nascent obviously in Nevada. And that's been challenging too because, you know, in terms of market research, when I was working in higher education, hospitality, and IT, you know, I'd be able to pull market research from Nielsen or Scarborough that would advise me on exactly what decisions I should be making as a director of marketing. What's interesting here is, yes, there are several other cannabis markets in other states, but none of them are exactly like Nevada. We have a very tight fist on how many licenses go out, which means our landscape is less competitive than a lot of the other states. And so it is helpful for me to kind of look 6 months, you know, Alaska is about 6 months ahead of us on recreational. Colorado is obviously many, many years ahead of us. California is decades ahead of us. And so it's helpful to look at market research from other states, but ultimately, it's not bulletproof. You know, nothing really can inform me exactly what's definitely going to work. And so we kind of have to do our own research. So if we need answers to questions, we have to conduct our own exit surveys with our customers in the dispensary. We have to conduct our own polls. We have to conduct our own focus groups. Because really, you know, there's no other state industry that is exactly like Nevada. And so that's honestly what makes it very challenging, but very exciting and fun as a marketer. The only thing is, though, is that doesn't include all the things that have been issued by memo. And so I'm not aware currently of a particular web portal that has all the state codes and then every single memo that's been issued. One may exist, but I've just been receiving them, you know, as they come in and creating my own folder on my computer of everything. I have my own portal. But the best place to start would be to look up the state codes. And I don't have the exact code number off the top of my head, but if you search Nevada Cannabis Advertising Regulations, it will come up. And it's a big, hefty PDF. So it's a lot of very, very valuable reading there.
Geographical restrictions on where I can advertise either county by county here in Nevada or in California?
No.
No, there. All right, that's easy enough.
Yeah.
Good thing I wasn't taking a bite. That would
You know, I could talk a little bit more about advertising to the rural counties. So not so much in our Reno store, but in our Carson City store. It really does service a very, very large geographical area because we've got people who are driving from 4, 5, 6 hours away to visit our Carson City store, which is very, very high volume of visitors to handle at that store. And because of that, you know, a lot of those folks, since they are making such a long drive, they're having to budget ahead of time for this. And so the advertising that we do with them normally has to be focused on being budget conscious, making it very convenient, because certainly you would not want to drive that far and then get there and we don't have the product that you're looking for. So we really try to make sure that those folks are aware of features like express pickup, where we can pull all those products for them ahead of time so that they're absolutely available when they get there. But since those people are making these long trips and they're having to budget ahead of time, you know, we really want to make it easy for them to make those large bulk purchases, you know, certainly within regulation, because there is a limit on how much you're allowed to purchase at one time. But really emphasizing on convenience, emphasizing availability, and making sure that it's going to be there for them and that it's a very good deal since they are making a bulk purchase.
I mentioned California, so for any and all of you, you know, with it becoming legalized in the 5th largest economy in the world that we sit right next to, how do you see that affecting the industry as a whole?
Well, technically, since you know, we have to do everything discreetly and not cross state lines with all that. At the moment, we really are not allowing what's going on with the recreational market in California to affect how we're marketing to our customers in Nevada. And that's just a personal choice that we're making, is to focus entirely on Nevada. I know that the California recreational market has not taken off the way it was projected to, and that's really because, you know, the industry's been around for so much longer, and a lot of those folks that probably would be recreational customers, you know, they got their medical cards many, many years ago. You know, it didn't even really make that big of a ripple, you know, when rec went legal in California, because people who were, you know, established users, medical or recreational, had already found ways to get their product. And so, to be totally honest, the California market has had almost no effect on my strategy. It's probably the most interesting and challenging industry I've ever done any kind of marketing in. It's something that requires that I be engaged with the national news cycles. And also, it's incredibly rewarding because I'm really amazed by just how wide the demographics are of the people that benefit from our products. You know, I think that people maybe have an idea about who consumes cannabis, and I may have had that idea myself, and I was completely wrong. It really amazes me just the incredible diversity and walks of life of folks that benefit from our products that we see come through the stores.